that indicated you were being contacted by a deceased family member from the other side, such as through a dream, well, not hands yet. So, you know, through dreams, visitation, an electrical event, birds as messengers, objects that move, clocks that stop, etc. Well, now you can raise your hand. Okay. All right. What I would like to share with you are the events from the past 30-some years that have convinced me that the deceased relatives and friends communicate with us. See my fancy setup here. Anyway, but these are actual physical happenings or observable actions. And it's physical in that the discarnate is being without a physical body, you all know that. A discarnate relative is able to somehow trigger electrical devices that are very clearly visible and quite often with witnesses. So it's not like anecdotal where it's just you, but it's observed. After I've covered the electrical phenomenons, I've asked several others to later share their experiences that are not electrical. But I'll indicate, anyway. So, when people have had a near-death experience, and they report that they underwent, and they report what they underwent in the dimension they were in, that's anecdotal, right? It is based on a personal account rather than an observable event. It seems that, oh, well, here, I have all these slides, and I have not, come on. Okay, unexplained movement once, we covered dot clocks, communication brass, okay.
Can you speak into the mic a little bit more?
It's hard to hear.
I'm sorry?
Microphone, please. Speak to the microphone.
Yeah, put it down so that way,
Can it go higher?
put it down so we can speak it.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I
Thank
appreciate that. Okay. Anyway, when people have a near-death experience and they report what they underwent in the dimension they were in, it's anecdotal, right? But as it's based on a personal experience, it seems that there's no way the reported experience can be validated with empirical evidence or means of direct or indirect observation experiences. Yet, there are many instances when a discarnate seems to communicate with observable events and include witnesses within our reality plane, so that one of my skeptical friends can no longer say to me, Jack, you can say anything you want. Who's going to contradict you? Well, now I can. Okay. Sometimes you have similar experiences that are beyond a coincidence or a synchronicity. For example, I had 2 events concerning relatives at different times, different locations. When my mother-in-law passed, the family came to our home in Avon for a repast about dusk. Suddenly, the lights went out, and I headed for the basement to check the fuse box. By the time I got to the door, the lights went back on. So 15 months later, after my father's funeral in Ann Arbor, Michigan, we went to my brother's house for a repast about dusk, and suddenly the lights went out again. And he headed for the basement to check the fuse box, the lights went back on. Now, coincidence? The similarities and the distance and everything else indicates much more. In the above events, deaths of family members, their funerals, and me were the common denominators. 2 different families, 2 different locations, 1,200 miles apart, 2 different homes, and electrical wiring. And there were numerous witnesses in both cases. Anyway, that set me on a journey to better understand what, what these electrical synchronicities or phenomenons were about. These events are assumed to be connected with a deceased because they generally happen shortly after someone has died. Most of my personal and collected experiences have taken place within a few weeks of a departed. Although for me, there have been several events many months later and even years later. So, still, the connection of electrical events to the departed seem evident. For me, there have been numerous events more electrical that are not explainable by electrical mechanics, but indicate that it might be an attempt to connect with my family by the deceased. So consider the NDE and what it implies. Research has indicated that over 250 million people have had NDEs throughout the world. Now that's like every man, woman, and child in America having an NDE. And yet, the numbers don't make a difference to the scientific community, as the experience is basically anecdotal, and but not in the case of my discarnate communications, okay? After my sister Ellie passed in 2011 in Alabama, I collected 11 reported events by mostly my family members that indicated she was communicating with us. My most profound event had 2 involved witnesses. Yes, involved. They were involved in the incident. As my sister was under hospice, my brother Nick from Ann Arbor, Michigan, excuse me, and we were both on our way to see her one last time. Both of our flights were delayed. I arrived first at the Birmingham airport and was met by my sister's son, George, and his 20-year-old son, Tommy. They informed me that my sister had passed at 10 o'clock that morning while I was in flight. So as we awaited my brother's arrival, we sat at a round table. They were having coffee, and I had just finished drinking my orange juice from a small plastic bottle. So this little bottle was in front of me, and as we were talking, suddenly the bottle started to move about 14 or 16 inches. Well, we were stunned and we were speechless. Then eventually Tommy picked up the bottle and he put it back in front of me. And we waited, and sure enough, it started to move again and went about 14 inches. This time I picked it up and I put it back in front of me, and it stayed there, and I presume my sister Ellie wanted me to make the final connection with the bottle. I had 2 more events when I returned home. After shopping, I pulled into the garage, and as I reached to get the groceries, the garage door started to close. Now, my remote, my control, is attached to my visor up here. So there was no way I could have accidentally set it off. And now for the second event, which is kind of funny, for some unexplainable taste, I wanted potato soup. Now, I've never made potato soup, but we had potatoes, and so I went to the internet and I downloaded a random recipe. And then when I looked at the top, it turned out to be submitted by Ellie. Now, my sister's name, E-L-L-I-E, is very unusual. How many of you know someone or met someone who has a spelling of E-L-L-I-E? Well, that's astonishing. Okay. But anyway, it was quite, one of these synchronicities again. So, my brother in Ann Arbor wrote to me. It was Monday morning, the day before Ellie died. I woke at 7 and went to the kitchen, and I passed right by the front door, put the coffee on. I returned to the bedroom to shower. Then I awoke Betty. I glanced toward the hallway and saw that the reflection on the mirror by the entryway was showing the outdoors. It struck me as odd, so I went to the hall, and I found the front door was ajar about a foot. Now, no matter how much Betty and I discussed it, no explanation could be found because we use the garage entry exclusively and only use the front door for deliveries or visitors, of which we had none the day before. My sister's son, George, reported 7 events after his mother died. Now, please note, George's home was fairly new. It was less than 10 years old. It was set back about 50 yards from a country road so that no passing car might accidentally have a modem that has the same passcode to his garage. The first incident began with a tropical fish tank where Ellie sat for hours watching the fish. The tank light began to flicker on and off for days, even though he replaced the bulb. 2, the ceiling floodlights of the kitchen, another area where Ellie spent much of her time, also began to flicker on and off for days. 3, the garage door that is used 100% of the time for entering and exiting was open when he returned and found no one at home. 4, during the night, he was awakened by the sound of the garage door opening. When he investigated, the door was open. And when he checked, everyone else was asleep. It was the middle of the night. 5, the next night, he heard the garage door again. However, when he went, the light was on, but the doors were closed. But the light was on, which just happens anyway, and so he waited for the light to eventually dim and go off. And once again, everybody was asleep. Near the fish tank was a large television. Ellie and her granddaughter would watch the Disney Channel. The picture and the sound began to come and go randomly, so George...
Please speak up.
Oh,
Microphone,
oh,
please.
okay. So, once again, what was it? Oh,
Television.
anyway, George had 2 repairmen come to fix it, but they found nothing. So then he called a cable provider, and 2 technicians came and they found nothing. But they couldn't find anything to cause the interference. But the continued interference was isolated only to the Disney Channel. And then lastly, George tried to send me all this information many times from his home computer. But it wouldn't go through, so eventually he had to send it from his office in Atlanta, which is where I got my information here. All right. I forgot all about the slides. I guess I don't need them now. Okay. I have one more complex story about a widow. About 25 years ago, a psychologist friend of mine told me about these extraordinary events that a friend of hers was experiencing. And she thought I might be interested because of my involvement with the NDE phenomenon. And her friend and her husband lived in a large estate in mid-Connecticut. They had an electrical gate, fence, electrical front gate, 4-car garage, and a spacious home. Her husband, he was a major Wall Street entrepreneur who would be driven to Manhattan and back every day in a limo. And it required that he got up quite early, so he got up before his wife. One night his wife had an alarming dream. that when she went down to the dining area, he was dead and lying on top of the local penny saver. Now that's kind of an oxymoron. You know, if you know what a penny saver is, it's free and anyway, it was beyond his, it was beneath his editorial and financial interests, that's for sure. Anyway, upset, she went downstairs and she found him exactly as in her dream, with him on top of the penny saver. He had died of a massive heart attack. Soon, strange events began to puzzle her, such as the gate would be open when she returned from shopping. Different garage doors would open in the middle of the night. The burglar and fire alarm would go off in his downstairs office that she had sealed off after he passed. She had a technician inspect and change the alarms numerous times. A phone ringing on Valentine's Day with no one there and no dial tone. Although I never knew her, I never met her. Even to this day, I was intrigued. And I suggested to my psychologist friend that I might arrange a group meditation for her on a given Sunday afternoon. Well, the proposal was accepted, and the widow agreed to be in a comfortable situation. She'll turn off the phone and other possible distractions during the session. At the prescribed time, I went to my downstairs studio. I reclined on the mat with my head due north. As I meditated, much to my surprise, a vision of her, or who I thought was her, came to me. And just then, the boombox in the rec room adjacent to the studio went blaring. I jumped up, I was angered, I thought my teenage son had turned on the music while I was meditating. But much to my surprise, the rec room was empty, as my son was not at home. I was not familiar with my son's boombox, and I was trying to turn it down and turn it off. Eventually I had to unplug it. But anyway, I recalled the song on the boombox, and I jotted the title down. I don't remember what it is now, but anyway. I decided to do being an artist, I decided to do a pencil sketch of my vision. And it showed that the widow was sitting in a large wing chair that was on top of a small rug. She was wearing glasses, dressed casual, with sneakers. Behind her were floor-to-ceiling windows that backlit her in the chair. I dated the sketch and jotted down the title of the song that I heard on the boombox. The following week, I met my friend and I told her about my experience, and I gave her the sketch to share with the widow. 2 days later, my friend called and said the widow was profoundly moved and astonished. She said the scene was basically correct, except she was wearing slippers. Oh. Well, that was one of the most complicated events I have experienced. Looking at it now, the vision almost seemed like an OBE, but I don't recall traveling to her house, only that the vision came to me. Now, before I leave this event, I'd like to add one other incident about a radio occurrence similar to the boombox. 10 years ago, I reconnected with my old high school friend, my best friend Ray Dallin in California. And I went to visit him as his health was so bad he was unable to travel. It was a great reunion, and I met his twin daughters, who turned out to be famous international belly dancers. They're lovely ladies. Anyway, there was a lot of bonding, so that when Ray died several months later, I called his daughter with my condolences. During the talk, I asked if there were any unusual electrical events she might have witnessed. Well, that opened the floodgate of, oh my gosh, and And then she told me she described how the day after her father died, she, with her mother, sister, and her boyfriend, were driving to a restaurant in the early evening. The car radio was on a music station, and suddenly, she said, the car was filled with her father's aftershave lotion. Well, and then, she said, the radio changed stations on its own. And it was playing her father and mother's favorite song. Well, they were all stunned. Now, please note, there were 4 personally involved witnesses to this event. Anyway, the thing is, there are many avenues for the dead to connect with us, with tangible, observable events, but people don't pay attention. I think that when they witness an electrical event, they think fleetingly, gee, that's strange, that's odd. And then they forget about it, probably within 10 minutes, like we do with dreams. But sometimes people recall the event when I prompt them. So, for example, Joe of West Hartford remembered his uncle found an acorn on his bed after acorns fell on them during the burial service. But he said during the day his uncle had taken his coat off and on numerous times. Dory, a friend of mine in the Netherlands, recalled that her son and daughter-in-law reported that the room lights would suddenly glow brighter in the evening after the funeral. Sandra in Florida recalled that the refrigerator stopped working the day when her husband died, and my wife's aunt said that the refrigerator lights were out for half a day. Stu, a friend of mine, reported his new car battery went dead until AAA restarted the car before he could drive home after his cousin's funeral. So, now, this one is most recent, Christmas time. Manny, who is a distant cousin, lost his mother to cancer on Christmas Day. However, he came to the family gift unwrapping at my sister-in-law's home, and after my condolences, I suggested he pay attention for electrical events that might be his mother reaching out. 4 days later, at the wake, he happily confirmed that the lights flickered at home, and they flickered earlier in the funeral home. If I had not asked him to pay attention, he would not have recognized the connection that later made him smile. My wife, who is a retired nurse and educated in nothing but the facts, can sometimes surprise me. On 3 occasions when we were both in attendance, and I missed the electrical events. The first one was during the church celebration of life service for her uncle, and she pointed out that the light above the pulpit was blinking during the sermon. Another incident occurred during our stay in a Pennsylvania motel on our way to my brother's funeral in Michigan. While I was brushing my teeth, the lights went out and I was in total blackness. And I smiled, and then the lights went back on, and I opened the door, and my wife confirmed that the lights and the television had gone out. At the funeral home, during my brother's wake, my wife pointed out that the ceiling lights were blinking briefly while I was kneeling beside my brother's casket. I guess I was focused on my thoughts, and I may have had my eyes closed. The point is, even skeptical persons, such as my wife, may record unusual events once made aware of the phenomenon. Do you want to hear more stories?
Depends on the time, right?
Well, I'm working on it.
There are 5 more people this week.
Let's see, what time is it?
7:30.
Okay.
5 more people.
All right, well, this one's about lights. When I had an advertising agency in the 80s, our receptionist secretary would type agendas and reports for my NDE meetings in Farmington. It provided her with insights into the unusual phenomena, like electrical events after someone has passed. One day she shared that her grandmother reported the light would go on when she would enter the living room. So, after her husband died. Then the receptionist said, you know, she had witnessed it too, and she had gone and she checked, and the switch on the light was functioning fine. A year later, her grandmother died, and the lights would go out even more often. Anyway, I have many more stories, but I would like for you to hear about other forms of communication phenomena other than electrical. So the first one would be Jerry. Jerry, would you mind coming up, please? And
Come on down.
you know, I was so organized. I had printed names, and I was going to have everybody's who was going to speak sitting here, but I forgot them. Go along.
It's okay, we're here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is only the first half.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jerry.
Hi,
And
Jerry.
I am a recently retired hospital chaplain. And I know I'm not the only hospital chaplain in the room. Some of you, there's at least 2 of you here. And I'm sure you have lots of stories just like I do. So I'm only going to share 2 with you tonight. One is a personal story, and the other one is a pretty amazing story of one of my patients. The first one is my mom. We were talking about, this is sort of electrical, and it's certainly a coincidence, if you believe in coincidences. My mom passed just about 6 years ago, around Christmas time. And she loved classical music. And she was in a nursing home for several years before she passed. And we'd have the classical music station on WMNR all the time. And she'd listen to all this beautiful classical music. And a couple years before she passed, we talked about what kind of music she'd like played at her funeral. And one of the songs she chose was Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee. If any of you know that song, it's the last movement of Beethoven's 9th Symphony. So I wrote it down and put it in a drawer. So she went into hospice the day after Thanksgiving, 6 years ago. And she lingered for 5 days. And I was there on a Tuesday night. And as a hospital chaplain, I know what the signs are with her last moments. So I knew she was breathing her last. She passed away at 6 o'clock. And at 6:05, as I'm there crying my eyes out, I noticed the radio. What comes on the radio? Beethoven's 9th Symphony. And my daughter and I were there, and the chaplain, Rabbi Chaplain, came in. And then the funeral director came in. We were all there, witnesses to this, and as the funeral director took her body, it was the final movement of Beethoven's 9th, Joyful, Joyful. So that was her way of telling me that she had arrived and she was okay. And that song either is played at church at the most amazing times, or I actually was driving home on New Year's Eve, just this past a week or 2 ago. And what comes on the radio? Beethoven's 9th. And I like to think that when these songs happen, she's thinking about me just as much as I'm thinking about her. So that's our communication. That's our message to each other. So that's my personal story. But I also had a patient in the hospital. His name was Ralph. He was very sick. He was an elderly man. He had dementia, but he also had complicating medical conditions, so he couldn't go back to his nursing home just yet. And as you know, as a chaplain, we go in and visit everybody, and I tried to find out what religious tradition he had, if he had any. He couldn't answer me. He wasn't making any sense. So I did finally call his family and talk about that. But one afternoon, we have codes that go on in the hospital, and they called a rapid response to his room. So I went upstairs to see what was going on, and I looked in the room, and all the nurses were surrounding his bed. And they were, I'm not sure what they were doing. His code was a DNR, which is a do not resuscitate. So they didn't send the trauma group in to try to bring him back. So he was lying in his bed, and all of a sudden I heard the charge nurse say, "He's back." And everybody went, "Hooray!" So what Ralph did in the next few minutes was amazing. He sat up in the bed. He was actually sitting in a chair, and he'd been unresponsive. Nurses found him, and since he was a DNR, they put him back to bed, and they were just going to let him pass peacefully. Well, then he came back, and he sat up, and he looked at the nurses and said very clearly, "I saw Jesus. Jesus told me I'm not going to die this time, but I'm going to die the next time." And he looked at one of the young nurses right in the eye and said, "And I saw your grandmother." And the nurses were totally freaked out because near-death experiences in the hospital don't always happen that profoundly. And it just happened that about a week later he was moved to hospice, and he did finally pass peacefully upstairs in hospice. But I believe these things happen not necessarily for Ralph. I think it was a beautiful thing for him to experience, but it happened for us. And the nurses came to me afterwards and said, "What was that?" Because they'd been taking care of him. They knew he was not responsive. So that's one of my favorite stories. A true experience. So I have many more, but I know there's 4 other people, so thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Marie Minute, and she's going to describe her experiences with family visitations.
Thank you for this lectern up here. I think it's marvelous. My name is Marie, and so I'm just going to read this. It'll make it a lot easier. So as my second son was being born in 1959, a black cloud settled over me. I got the message, this baby is going to die. But Tom survived. He thrived. Next year, Sue was born. There was no change in the message. She was a very healthy baby. But my husband, Art, didn't like it when I told him about the cloud and my feelings of dread associated with it. Next year, I had another little girl. Betty Ann was a sweet, healthy baby. However, Saturday, the day after her second-month checkup, she began to get fussy. Sunday, she was worse. Monday, I called the doctor. "Bring her into the office," said he. I put her on her soft white dress and took her in to see the doctor. As he listened to her chest, his face became as white as her dress. "I'll meet you at the hospital." As we drove to Danbury Hospital, I realized this is the baby who's going to die. I began to mourn. They put her in an oxygen tent in the children's ward. The next day she had a private duty nurse, and she was in a private room. The nurse, excuse me. The nurse picked her up and put an oxygen mask over her nose and mouth as we entered the room. I thought we'd better leave. You know, this was in the olden days. As we did, two doctors came running down the hall toward us. I knew where they were going. We were ushered into the treatment room. The hospital administrator, the head nurse were there. My husband was the assistant administrator. So the administrator said, "She'll be okay." My husband agreed. "This is 1961, she'll be fine." I took Art aside and told him, "The doctor will come to the door, knock, and ask for Mr. Jarvis. Then they will go out into the hall. The doctor will say, 'I'm sorry to have to tell you that your baby has died. Would you like to see her?'" That all happened as soon as I had told him. So Art said, "Yes, I would like to see her." And I said, "No," because I knew she was dead, and I didn't want to see her dead. I had just seen her alive. Betty Ann had died that day, October 31st, 1961. Ever since then, Halloween is rather special for me. Because my husband was abusive, I divorced him in '74. He smoked cigars, cigarettes, and pipes. He died of metastatic lung cancer. I did visit him in Hartford Hospital and would speak with the doctors. I had my nurse's uniform on as I was coming from work at New Britain Memorial Hospital. The day before he died, he apologized for not being there for our children. I said he could do more for them where he was going. I was planning to attend a church retreat that the weekend of May 1st to 3rd in 1987. That's when it was. However, I called them on May 1st and said, "My husband will die tomorrow and I can't go to the retreat." He died on May 2nd, 1987. Following a healing with Karen Nemry, a couple of weeks after my son Bill's death in May of 2005, she asked if I'd like to check on my family on the other side. I said, "Sure." My daughter Betty Ann, it's the one who died in '61, said she had come so that we could get acquainted, so she could be with me during the difficult times ahead. As I said, my husband was abusive. Bob, my oldest, had died of metastatic lung cancer, like his dad, and his family was blessed to be with him as he passed in June 2002. She had a very difficult time, Karen did, finding Bob. He was busy about his spiritual work. I was happy to hear that. Karen also had trouble finding my first husband. He was locked in a field of negativity. He had a message for me. I can get him out of this field of negativity by doing certain, by playing my bowls in a certain manner. This is my Tibetan singing bowls. Those of you who know me know I do Tibetan singing bowls. I teach it and do healings with the bowls. 2 weeks later, I went to a class taught by my teacher on Tibetan singing bowls in Andover, Massachusetts. I asked permission to teach Art's technique for getting a person out of a field of negativity. Michener said yes and became my student. I had 20 students for this exercise, which is quite loud. So what you do is you hold the bowls and you bang them very loudly. Yes, Denise is shouting yes, and yeah, she had been there. You bang it really loud, 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 loud. And then you stop and then you sing the bowls and you said, and I asked the person who is either in this side or the other side to go on their way, to be as they are, to do what it is they need to do. I have one more. My son Bill completed suicide on April the 23rd in 2005 in Los Angeles, California. The LA County coroner called to say Bill had been found in the LAX hotel. So we arranged a church service for him there. We did a short ceremony as we buried him with his brother and sister. in Wilton, Connecticut. I had a dream that I was going to a nursing convention. One of my friends mentioned she'd seen my son Bill, at the burger restaurant down the hill. No, I had not stopped to see him, to go down to have a burger or whatnot and before the conference. So I went down to the restaurant, and sure enough, Bill was waiting at tables. He looked up, led me to a back room where we embraced and began talking. First of all, he assured me he really loved me. Suddenly he said, "I want to go back." I was startled, and I thought, oh no, I don't want to go through this again. Then he said, "I'll call to God." He reached for the red phone. "I want to go back." "Yeah, I really do." "She wants to talk to you," Bill said, and handed me the red phone. God's voice sounded like my own. "He's not coming back anytime soon, not for a long time." Now Bill comes toward me and says, "I want to go back." His voice was changed. He was no longer excited. He was calm. And he reaches out to hug me. I still have the red phone in my hand. And as we hug, we embrace for a long, warm hug. And I know that as soon as my hands reach my chest, he will be gone, back to where he'd come from. And sure enough, my hands reached my chest. I opened my eyes. I'm in my bed. And Bill has gone. And I am comfortable with that. I know he is okay. Thank you.
All right, the next speaker is Patricia Davis. Patricia, I don't know if you want to stand up or come here.
I'll do whatever's comfortable. I'm new to this, I'll go up here, okay? I'm not a public speaker, and after everything I've heard, I'm like, oh my. Oh, okay, so I have notes, and I don't have my glasses. That's okay. Yes, I've lost a few people that, I've loved and had them all just about in dreams, but I chose 3. Your glasses are on the table.
Oh, those are for distance. That's to get me home tonight. Okay, so here we go. Dream number 1, and I've had several. This is like, an amazing opportunity, so thank you for having me come tonight. When my Alaskan Malamute Cody passed over, I was devastated. Approximately 1 month later, I had a dream vision with her in it. Cody came to me in a vision in my home between a breezeway and a kitchen door. She had the most amazing smile on her face, and I guess dogs can do that. And when I saw her from the hall to the kitchen, I asked her telepathically, because of course animals can't speak, but they can go mind to mind. I asked her telepathically, "What are you doing now?" And she replied via telepathy, "I am greeting them at the door." When I awoke, that grief immediately disappeared, and I decided to teach an animal communication class for the Erase program in Branford. And what an amazing experience that was. And everybody was coming to the class with their beloved animals who crossed over. So that class went from one thing to another. The second dream vision to share, a distant cousin of mine, Louie, had passed. And even though I was not close to him, I had a dream vision of him after he passed. And what he was doing, he was walking towards a door, and when he turned to me, he had an amazing smile and kept walking, not saying a word. I felt like Louie was okay. Am I talking too fast? I feel like I'm going. Okay. My third dream vision to share. A good friend of mine had passed in October of 2018. I had had a few dreams with him in it, but this one stood out. He was sitting on a bed, cross-legged, and playing a song that he wrote and was emphatic that I listened to. He was telling me he was upset that his best friend had passed over. And in part of my dream vision, a song was playing in that I recognized, but when I woke, I forgot what that song was. The vision was enough for me to look online to check on this friend he was talking about. And oh my gosh, I found out that John's best friend had crossed over about a week before I had the vision, and that one was for the books. short, sweet, to the point.
Thank you, Patricia, thank you very much. Now, I would like to invite Natasha to come and tell us about her clock and moved object experiences. Thank you.
Okay, in case somebody doesn't know, I'm Natasha, and whoever doesn't know, I'm Russian, that's my Moscow accent. Okay, so I've already spoken here about my contacts with the deceased that happened in my dreams, where I asked them specific questions and got answers. I also had visitations in fully waking state. Those visitations were silent. Only two. I had only two. And they were silent, but when I didn't only see, but I touched them. We touched hands, we held hands, and we hugged. And they felt absolutely material, like real people, nothing like air. No, they were solid, like real people. But they did not answer my questions, and they did not look exactly at me, but kind of through me. Well, yet today I was asked to share about a different kind of visitation. I have two strange experiences that happened in my Manchester home when I just immigrated to this country. I came here with my daughter. I immigrated to marry my American fiancé. And his first wife had died of cancer 8 years before that. So within the first month, and this is the most stunning experience I haven't yet shared, the other maybe you heard, within the first month I remember my daughter was at school, my husband and I were in the kitchen, and suddenly we heard a loud noise like an explosion. We ran into the living room and saw that a crystal vase just broke on its own, like exploded, was blown up to pieces, and the artificial flowers were scattered on the floor and the shards, and it was very, very strange. My husband was seemed upset and more at a loss. He said to me, you know, it was Gail's, his first wife's favorite vase. I gave it to her on our wedding anniversary. So I was stunned. But then kind of, at that time, I didn't think much about these events. I began to think much more, and I kind of forgot about it. It didn't mean all that much to me, though there were many objects of hers that I cherished. She was a great craftswoman. She made beautiful dolls that she sold through the Christmas tree store, and crocheted and everything, and I treated all these objects and her memory with great care and love. You wouldn't believe with love. I identified like she was my sister. Well, but the next episode, it happened within the first week that I arrived. Not on the first night, I didn't notice, but we both heard every night when we were in the bed, in the master bedroom. We slept in the same master bedroom that Jack and his first wife used. The bed was different, but it was the same room. And we both started hearing footsteps on the roof. I should say our roof is flat, practically, with a very, very slight incline. It's a contemporary style, and no attic. So the roof is right above the ceiling of the bedroom. And it was footsteps and footsteps every night. Then sometimes I wake in the middle of the night, my husband slept, but I would hear them again. And they repeated, probably not every night, but very frequently for years. For years. And I didn't notice when they kind of stopped. Didn't really pay attention. When it first happened, he said, that he was also surprised. He said that had never happened before. What could it be? Oh, he said, don't worry, must be a bird. What bird in January, in the middle of the night, and so heavy? An animal? No, it was definitely like human pace, and not just the sound, it was heavy vibration. It was like someone really walking. It came to the point that I asked my husband to go up on the roof and check. It was after light snowfall and then footsteps at night. I said, go in the morning. He went to the roof to check. He found absolutely no footprints of any kind, bird or animal or human. Well, so I might only now, I think I mentioned that to Tina. She told me that must, I never put two and two together, but Tina suggested it must have been her spirit. She came to her old home, either jealous or just curious, or to see how life was going on without her, to look at the woman that replaced her, and so on. Well, but I always had very nice and warm feelings towards her and towards her memory. Took care of the grave together with my husband, and continue to do so. And then another episode, very quick, it's about the clock. When my father died in Moscow, and I witnessed, and not only I, the whole family, that we all lived in the same big apartment. The clock, there was a clock on the wall right next to his bed. That clock had a plate. It was given on his retirement, had a plate with his name for excellent service and so on. And that clock stopped. But it stopped exactly
What kind of clock was it? You didn't say.
Oh, yeah, yes, that's right. The clock was mechanical, old style. And it needed winding once a week. And it was wound just recently, either the previous night or the night before. So it was a long time to go. And still the clock stopped when he died. He died at home quite unexpectedly, and he wasn't weakened, and he died of stroke. He had reasonably enough energy at that time. I mean, his spirit was possibly still strong, because the clock kept going another 6.5 hours, not at the time of death. It didn't stop at the time of death like it happens in movies, but and they would know exactly who killed who when. But in real life, the spirit obviously was that strong that it kept the clock going for another 6.5 hours.
And he wasn't prepared to die. He wasn't.
That's right. I said, yeah. He was. It was sudden. He wasn't weakened at the time of his death.
So maybe he didn't know that he had died.
Probably he didn't. He was still lingering there. Because as we know from literature, people know, or not everybody realizes that they have died. We know that. Probably he was still there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Bob, would you be kind enough to share your precognitive event?
All right, most of you know me as I'm Rob, and that's my name, not my job, all right? And 2002, my daughter contacted cancer. Didn't mention at the time, but it came out to be pancreatic cancer. I put up a hell of a good fight, too. 2004, I got cancer. I got rid of my things. Well, that wants me standing here in the physical sense, okay? But in 2004, when I had cancer turned for the worse. Those who know, I work for Manchester Hospital. I am an LCSW, and I work as a psychotherapist. That's one word, folks, not two, okay? And so I'm coming back during lunch. I'm rather stoked because of my life. I won't get on a Vietnam bed, I mean, a number of things. But I'm coming back, and I've been stoked through this whole time. I talked to my daughter about her impending death and what to expect. And all of a sudden I started crying in my car during lunchtime. And I said, no, I can't, I got a client, I gotta be together by 1 o'clock, you know? Who wants to walk in and see the therapist crying, right? Kind of nerve-wracking. Probably, and I just remember looking up, God, if you take me instead. She had 2 little girls, 2 of my granddaughters. So this lasts probably a minute, minute and a half. And when I said, okay, I have to stop, within 15 to 20 seconds, I got a call from my son. She had just died. Now here's the thing, folks. She lived in California and I was in Connecticut. She came to say goodbye. And I felt it. And I've never forgotten that. I still hear her voice now then. The 2 other instances I'm going to share are rather unique, and I'll just run through them real quick, but I'm practicing psychotherapy. This is third party coming through. I have a guy in front of me who found his son committed suicide, a shotgun to the head. Needless to say, it's pretty messy, all right? His only son, only child, really. He's sitting in front of me, and I'm getting ready to give him another appointment, and all of a sudden I look up and said, I hear Anthony, no, Tony. I said, look at him. Now, when I'm saying this, folks, and other people who can do this once in a while, no, you really don't know what you're saying as far as any context. You're just saying words that are being told our vision. So I look at the guy and says, you know a guy named Tony? He goes, yeah. He says, Tony's crossed over, hasn't he? I said, yeah. He died 6 months ago from a heroin overdose. He said, Tony told me you got your kids back. And the guy jumps up, says, I'm good. I'm saying, that's great. Why? Okay. Because again, I have no idea, right? He says, Tony was one of my best friends. My son loved me to go see Tony because Tony would always teach him magic tricks. He says, we never left Tony's without him saying, I got your kids back. So I got a name and a single for this party. It wasn't for me, all right? The second one, I had a woman whose significant other, 13 years, died very quickly of mouth cancer, metastasized real quick. Got the diagnosis, surgery, 3 weeks later he died. She comes in, sits down in my office and says, I just want to know if George is okay. And listen, I don't have a plan, this just comes sometimes. It doesn't come from everybody, it just comes. I said, yeah, I said, I got a guy who looks like James Dean. For those who don't know who remember James Dean is, I hope you do, okay? That guy looks like James Dean sitting there. Tennis shoes, you know, everything. And he's saying George is fine, and this guy is George's brother. Woman says, he didn't have a brother. Oh, okay. So I go through about 45 minutes, coming up with the second uncle twice removed through a divorce. I don't know, I just got this guy looking like James Dean. Then he says, oh, wait a minute, he did have a brother. Okay, but he died when George was a little boy. And I said, would that be around 1961? She said, yes. I got an image of somebody she didn't even remember that was the brother of a guy who died. And he came to me, gave me the time frame, so I know what time he had died in. I have so many of these that we don't have time to go over that blow me away when they happen. So do I have just a minute more, or do I have 30 seconds? Done?
Everybody's over.
Okay, well, that's it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Bob.
No, that's okay.
You know, it's, I overloaded this presentation. It really needs much more time. So, anyway, these are just a few examples of otherworldly communications that are not electrical. There are more, and one of the more profound methods is through clairvoyance and mediumship, where information is gained through ESP or mediating communications between the dead and the living. And to speak to that method is our co-facilitator, Tina. Tina?
I'm here out of love because I'm on the last stage of my cold, so my voice sounds different, so please bear with me. All right, so these are just excerpts from my book that I published a few months ago. So I want to share just a specific situation that happened to me with my father. First of all, I have to go back to when I was 2 years old, and that's when my sister died. And after that, my father was, in his grief, he would get drunk all the time and then blame me for my sister's death. But, you know, that was the drama that was being played out. So at the same time, I started to see this, what I called my beautiful lady. Every night before I fell asleep, she would come and just float around. I remember so vividly the bottom of her feet. And she would stay with me until I fell asleep. Okay, and I didn't know who she was. I just called her my beautiful lady, and I looked forward to all those visitations from the age of 2 until I was about 8 years old. And I learned just a few years ago that at that age, at the age of 8, is when the ego sets into the physical body, and that's when you start asking, you know, questions, or you don't want to be different and all that. So that's what happened to me. I said I didn't want to be different, and so the visitation stopped until 24 years ago when she came again. But so this concentration right now needs to be on my father after he passed. And before he passed, a few years before he passed, he was a funny guy. I don't think he meant to be funny, but he was. And I was concerned about him, and I said, of course I had to talk to him in Italian because he didn't know English. He thought he did, but anyway, so I said, Papa, please, not that I want you to die, but when you do, please know that you have to look for the light. And he goes, what light, what light? We died 6 feet under, that's it. So the same day that he died, he died around the afternoon, and in the evening, I was just kind of reminiscing about the situation with my life with him and all that. And all of a sudden, with my eyes wide open, he came. He was right up there, close to the ceiling in my bedroom, because I was laying down. And it was like, not the whole body, it was just his bust, but I could see right through him. It was like a holographic imagery, it was flat. And he said, my beautiful daughter, I am so sorry. And that was something that I had never heard before, and it was very helpful for me to hear that. And then it all changed. It was all, although I heard the voice with these few words, but then it became into a mode of telepathic communication, where I understood why this drama was chosen, played out, and I had this full-fledged knowledge of everything. So that's it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Tina. Well, let's see if I got this. All right. Next, I would like for James Van Pelt, James Clement Van Pelt, because there are 2 James Van Pelts, from the Yale Divinity School, to speak about the interface between the discarnate, the interface of the discarnate between the mind and the brain. James?
How much time do I have? How much time?
How about 12?
12?
I'm sorry to do that.
It's all right. Oh, wow. This is really an amazing space, isn't it, that's been created here. Death is ultimate. It's, you know, they talk about death and taxes, but it's really just death. And in the face of death, somehow we get in touch with deeper things, deeper, more real things than we usually interact with. And the nature of the space that we inhabit when we're in this in this able to make contact changes. The lighting is different. The feelings that we have are different. And my interest personally has been to have some of these experiences and try to understand them. And as the head of Yale's, former head of Yale's Initiative in Religion, Science, and Technology, it was sort of a challenge for me to try to make those things fit together. Many of you know, probably, that if you share some of these experiences, you might have an expectation of a certain response, which is to poo-poo it, to write it off to hallucination, dream, to feel that there's something unreal about it, that you're kidding yourself, etc., etc. And that's coming from the idea that what's real, what is really real, is what science studies, right? And what is that? That's the physical world. And so we haven't been talking so much about the physical world tonight. We've been talking about a reality that goes beyond the physical world, that includes the physical world, but goes beyond it. So, no, that was you. That was for you. So I think that one thing that we need is we need to have some defense against that response, because otherwise we can feel very vulnerable. We can lose our opportunity to understand what's going on with these things. So I want to talk about two things. Number one, what are we and who are we? And secondly, how does all this stuff work? How can I make these kinds of stories fit in with the world that you encounter when you read Scientific American or watch Nova on public TV? You're not going to see NDEs on Nova. Why not? Why not? What instead are we getting? So let me start, first of all, by giving you a brief model of how our lives work, how reality works. And basically, what science is concerned with is the senses that pour into us, the physical senses, the touch, the taste, the hearing, the seeing, all those kinds of things. And those things come into our bodies through our senses, but they have to go through a transition to make them understandable to our minds. And that transition happens in a part of us that's called the affective, and the sensations turn into feelings. Those feelings then are put into a form that the mind can understand, and they're called the cognitive. And finally, those cognitive sensations resolve into intentions. And those intentions then go back through that circuit and turn into actions that we take and experiences that we have. So in making those transitions, when it comes to reaching out to entities that are discarnate and places that are non-physical, when we do that, we find that we're dealing with the most ephemeral, the most non-physical aspects of reality on both sides of the physical and the area of consciousness. And that zone is called the quantum zone for science. And it's the smallest possible things that there are the quantum aspects of reality. Those quantum aspects are what gives birth to reality from moment to moment. And at the same time, those quantum aspects of reality interface with the most physical aspects of consciousness. And so somehow those meet together and interface. And that's where consciousness and physicality meet and form our connection with things beyond the physical. When we consider who we are and what we are, it's very natural for us to think of ourselves purely in physical terms. But a way of explaining what we really are is by subtraction. And the saying is that you cannot be what you have, and you cannot have what you are, right? So the things that you think of, like your money, your jobs, your connections to this world, how you look, all of those things are things you have. Your memories even are what you have. But what you have is not who you are, right? And likewise, in the same idea, what you are is not things that you can have. The Hindu religion has a meditation for this, which is called neti neti, and it means not this, not that. And so the meditation is, you come to the master and you say, I know what I am. I'm all these memories I have. And the master says, neti, neti. You know, well, I'm my ambitions, you know, my accomplishments. That's who I really am. Neti, 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 neti. And so on and so on. And finally, it's all stripped away. And when it's all stripped away, then you're in a position to know who you really are. You are not your body. Even Jesus says that. Jesus says, you are the one who's in the temple. The temple is your body, but you're not your temple. Your temple is something you have, not something you are. The discarnates are the ones who don't have bodies. Why would they want to connect with us then? Why would they want to reach out and touch the physical world? Turn off the lights, make the lights flicker, etc. By the way, has anybody seen the TV show The Stranger Things? Yeah, okay. So in there, a key element of that is the lights that flicker and they communicate. So I think it's great that Jack is ahead of that TV production. The thing about the discarnates is we don't really know much about them. And we can't really fully trust what we do know about them. If a discarnate knows everything about you and remembers the trip you took to Colorado and remembers your nickname and all these things, the discarnates have access to that sort of knowledge. So you can't rely on it. So you have to keep your guard up when you're dealing with this stuff. And the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, the other major traditions warn us, don't get involved, don't get hung up with the discarnates, because you don't know who you're dealing with. Now some of us do, and they're the ones that are valid mediums. But I'll tell you a brief story on the nature of the danger of that. For example, we were warned not to mess with the Ouija board. That's an example. There was a very prominent bishop of the Anglican Church named James T. Pike. There's a character in Star Trek named after him. And he made it his mission to tell people that a lot of the religious beliefs that we hold secret are just made-up stories, you know, resurrection and miracles and so on. His son committed suicide. Then he had a whole series of occasions of poltergeist activity. And he was able to divine from this contact that this was his son's spirit. And his son began to give him instructions, do this, do that, don't go to this meeting, you know, don't try to help these people. And eventually, Bishop Pike wound up in the desert in Israel with his new wife, and they both died. They were both led into that. And it's like in that movie, what's the name of the movie about the girl that gets possessed? The Exorcist. Yeah, I was thinking, it can't be Exodus. I'm not sure it's The Exorcist. And as you know, what that movie was really all about was not about the girl. It was about using the girl to get to the priest. And so, yes, somebody said my name, but that's okay. I'm really saying all that to warn you to be careful when you're dealing with these entities. The final thing I'd like to say, I think I have a little bit more time to say that we are not who we think we are. We are not the things that we are attached to. Those are the things that we are asked to give up. An illustration of this is there was a football player I knew, and he was a very tough guy, and his mother died. And I met with him a few weeks later, and he was very upset. And he was upset about the fact that he couldn't remember, you know, just on his own, what his mother looked like. And as I talked to him, I realized that he was talking about what his mother looked like physically, right? What his mother would look like in a picture. But that wasn't how he saw his mother, really. He saw her beyond her face. And one of the Zen koans, one of the Zen meditations, is to say, what is your original face? In other words, what is my face? It's a bunch of muscles moving parts of my face, and in doing so, I'm sending out messages about how I feel about things, right? And you know, our dogs do that, and our cats do that. They send out messages with their faces. But what we really look like is what's behind those muscles, what's behind those signals. It's what the codes are expressing, not the codes themselves. And so as you get older, and your relatives get older, and the people you love get older, when you first see them, you might be a little bit surprised by the way they look. But as you talk to them, that goes away. That mask of your physical goes away, and you begin to relate to them heart to heart. And that's where you really know what they look like and what you look like. So, if I have just a few more minutes. No, let's take a vote. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you very much. It's been a great privilege.
Can I just comment on
Yes.
two things in what's his name? James Van Pelt's, James Van Pelt's presentation. Just two things. Some of what you mentioned, it's about a real beauty, what you look like, how
Yeah.
you are perceived. It's still preserved in some traditions in the Orient, in Japan. A beautiful, like here in this country, we have a beauty pageant. So who's beautiful? We have no idea what she's like in life. She may be not a very nice person, but she's beautiful. But in Japan and other Oriental countries, a woman considered to be beautiful, or a person, when her inner beauty shows through in addition to her features. And I think it's an awesome way to look at people and assessment of beauty. And another thing is about the Ouija board. There is Ouija board. We had a woman, her last name Gali, she died recently. What's the first name? Gali. She was here with a mirror. She did a presentation about crying and
Rosemary.
dark mirrors.
Yes.
Rosemary
Yeah.
Gali. She commented, she's a famous psychic and everything, she commented that the Ouija board is getting a lot of bad publicity, and it's not justified, it's not bad, it's not harmful, and nothing wrong about trying. And James Van Praagh, I just finished a book by him. He not just started, he did later on a lot of, for years he used the Ouija board at the beginning of his career with another psychic who actually showed it to him.
Yeah, the Ouija board will tell you that, yeah.
Not necessarily the Ouija board, she's a psychic other than the Ouija
By
board.
the way, Ouija, it's yes, we,
Yes,
and ya.
yeah. Oui, French,
Oui, yeah.
like Southern.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, we have a collection of assumed contacts with the other side. I want to quote something from Pim van Lommel. Did I do that right? You know, he's the Netherlands doctor who's written volumes on scientific support of the NDE and the survival of the human consciousness. In a book on the mystery of being by Binanzo, Van Lommel states in his essay, The Science and the Mystery of Consciousness, the following. He says, 1. The NDE research indicates the possibility of continuity of our consciousness after death. He says, it's been proven scientifically that during NDE, enhanced consciousness is experienced independently of the functioning brain. We have a body and we are conscious, but without a living body, we can still have a conscious experience as during an NDE. He concludes that at the time of physical death, consciousness will continue. It will continue to be experienced in another dimension, past, present, future, enclosed. Now, is that what we refer to as our soul or our spirit? He says that death, like birth, may be a mere passing from one state of consciousness to another. That endless consciousness has existed and always will exist independently of the body. That there's no beginning, nor will there be an end to our consciousness. Wow. That's Pim van Lommel. So he confirms what I concluded for myself, that our consciousness will be is internal, maybe internal, eternal, not internal, eternal. And now, this part here is oversimplified, and I would appreciate if you would bear with me, but human beings are, in essence, electrical, in that our bodies operate by electrochemical impulses to and from the brain, that the brain's storage of information and memories is enabled through electrical means. That the average neuron in the human brain has a 0.07 volts and consumes about 12 watts of energy. So if Penn is correct, and he has advocated that the consciousness survives the body, the question is, does the consciousness retain that electricity, that 0.07 volts? So if it does, can that small amount of electrical energy interface with a garage door opener? That's a big question. The other part is intention. And I'm trying to establish certain elements in my presentation. And intention is a way that perhaps a discarnate can activate a garage door. Intention is somebody's idea or plan with a specific outcome. So there's substantial scientific investigation and research into the ability of intention to influence change in objects, in animals and human beings. Lynn Taggart, who wrote The Intention Experiment, has found that intention thoughts by focus groups on scientific, quantifiable targets can actually affect animals, plants, and humans. So we're talking about something that is scientifically accepted. From a personal experience, I've had 12 years, I have in the past 12 years, I facilitated a bi-monthly, and now it's a bi-monthly meditation for Marisi in Rotterdam, who was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, or cancer of the bone, which is very painful. And over 300 participants, international colleagues and friends, are asked to meditate on her behalf with prayers and thoughts of healing intention during a specific day and a specific time. And without fail, Marisi has always reported that she had amazing positive results. Now that may have helped extend her doctor's prognosis from 5 years to 12. Anyway, our prayers and our intentional thoughts somehow produce physical and observable results. How this is accomplished over such great distances is a mystery to me. But it may suggest an answer as to how a deceased surviving consciousness can manipulate electrical devices by intentional thought. So in conclusion, what do we have? A litany of unexplained events that indicate communication with the departed, like dreams, visitations, electrical phenomena, birds as messengers, etc. But most are anecdotal and difficult to confirm. However, the electrical events are not only observable, but quite often have witnesses, and sometimes involve participants like my nephew. So I would like to focus on an electrical phenomena. I would like to focus on the electrical phenomena of these communications between the discarnate and the living. And because it's tangible, it's physical, it's quantifiable, and that we can use a semi-scientific approach to investigation. So first, we have a variety of electrical events that are observable by others. The electrical elements are fact. The human brain is electrical, operating with a 0.07 volts. Fact. Consciousness resides in the brain, based on Pim van Rommel. And because a discarnate, beings without physical bodies, the assumption is that consciousness also has that 0.07 volts of energy. Another assumption is that consciousness generates electrical events. Okay, to be determined is, I haven't been able to find out how much voltage is required to activate an electrical device like a remote. Fact, intention, a thought, a planned outcome, can produce changes in animals, plants, and human beings. And the assumption is that electrical events are triggered by discarnate using intention. So if you have a consciousness that is functioning in another dimension, that it may actually be able to use intention to physically activate a door. Anyway, so that's what I'm at. So what I'm asking is this. I'm turning to you to ask for your thoughts and your suggestions on where and to whom to go to for answers. Any thoughts on how to investigate this? I would really appreciate if you would raise your hand. And if you speak, would you be kind enough, not 2 minutes to allow for other people to talk. So with that, is anyone interested in sharing ideas on how to make this hypothesis acceptable?
Could you repeat the hypothesis, please?
I'm sorry?
Repeat the hypothesis, please,
Well,
once again.
Okay, the hypothesis is that discarnates are real, and that they may have an electrical charge, a voltage, that it originally had when it was in the brain, and that it's capable of electrical changes through intention, through a thought. I mean, yes. Yes. Would you mind standing, please?
I would assume it has something to do with mental telepathy. I mean, because here on Earth, you have people that have mental telepathy that can move things, move objects.
Okay.
And then the other thing is everything vibrates around us.
That's true.
So if there's a way, I mean, I just got sent, thank you Tina, just got sent where Buddhists have made sound that lifted a rock up. So there's vibration that we function with, that if the vibration's off, it throws all of us off.
Okay.
To having a headache, to feeling nauseous, etc. So vibrational energy has a lot to do with what's going on here as well as what's going on all around us atmospherically.
So could a consciousness actually initiate a vibration through intention, through a mental thought?
Well, you said
0.07 volts.
volts. Volt is a vibration.
Right, but that's in the brain.
It's
I'm
a
sorry?
vibration.
But the volt is in the brain, the neuron, when the
Right.
discarnate has
Right.
no
And
brain.
yeah, there's
It's not,
somebody
no,
here
but
is a
it's,
physicist, as I
that's the
remember.
old theory of
So
what they
It's
say.
a lot
you
more
have
than just
everything
brain.
But
moving
please,
around.
just let one person speak, yes?
Everything's moving around. You have protons, neurons, electrons, all moving around, all with different vibrations. You know, the Earth functions on 7.83 megahertz, for instance. So there's all kinds of different vibrations.
Okay.
Everything has a vibration.
Right.
Every single
Everything.
thing in this world
Everything.
has a vibration. A stone has a vibration.
Could you stand, please?
Next.
My understanding is that discarnates, when they try to communicate with us, that they have to bring their vibration down lower so that we can receive the information. So they are actually at a higher vibration than we are. So, and that's why we're always trying to create our vibration higher so that we can connect.
Okay, thank you. Jamie, you had,
Jeff?
Jamie, you had
One
something?
thing that I wanted to add to this is that,
Oh.
I agree with Denise, right, Denise?
I can't hear you.
Yes,
Can you
Denise,
speak up?
Is that,
Speak up, please. We can't hear
She
you.
wants to add what I said.
anything yet.
She's trying to add to what I said.
Yes, what I'm trying to say is that I agree with Denise. When we come and when we become people, we are all made of energy. When we pass, that energy is still around. And as a part of the one that is created, and again, I just believe in we're all created from the one, that what we do is for somebody to have communication with us, they not only use the energy that they have, but they also use the other energy around them. And the intention of your energy of wanting to hear from them is part of that. They couple that with all the other energy, and that's where they start to learn to be able to connect with us. Some entities or some, it's not that they still have a brain, it's the energy of what their consciousness is. So when people talk about the difference between energy and the brain, it's two different entities entirely. So even though they pass, their energy is still around, they couple it with the other energies and they're able to communicate. They're able to touch the lights and be able to flicker them on, able to just work with other different things, turning the water on or something like that. So it's not just they pass and they're gone, it's that they couple with other energies so they can be able to present you with moving an object or hearing something on the TV that you need to hear.
Okay, thank you. Now, before we continue, what I would appreciate if when you are sharing your thoughts and suggestions, if you wouldn't mind writing it up and emailing it to me so I can put this into the portfolio of information, okay? I know it's a lot of work, but it's very important. Yes, yes.
Just very briefly, it's when we talk about 0.07 volts that might or might not open the garage door, this is a false premise. We know that whatever mind, consciousness comes from there, it taps on higher consciousness. It's so much amplified to the point that it's unbelievable. And here on this earth, on this plane, the healers or hypnotists or healers, whoever, they do not use their own consciousness. They tap to much higher levels, and they are just conductors of that powerful, extremely powerful energy. It's not 0.7. What 0.7 and measurement in the brain has nothing to do with that consciousness that survives.
Okay.
It has a little to do, but not
Yes.
all of it.
Real quick, Jeff, there's an old book many years ago, I don't remember the author, it's called The Intention Experiments. Pretty thick book, but they go step by step by step by step of different things they experiment with. It's absolutely fantastic book.
Well, that's the book I was quoting.
Okay, that's what you quoted, okay. I'm sorry, I thought it was,
Okay, Lou, but 2 minutes.
Yeah, hey, Jack, the very important thing is for us to put a lot of things together. Like, for example, what you were saying, the physical, but also the brain tells us messages for the body.
Yeah.
But for us, it's like the brain, but our mind is to listen to the brain and work with that and question and see what it is. And like you're saying, there's no beginning, there's no end. It's a constant flow. But the thing is, what you see, you want to look at it and see it. And then like what you're saying is to meditate on it and to look at it and to understand it and explore it. And what is this? But you just don't want to just stay there on what the mystery is. You want to be able to apply that mystery and to use it in the function. So it's the physical, the brain, the energy, and everything. I had something that I got really dizzy and everything, But what I did was, I learned about it, and I found on extremes, things happen. But to be in balance, you could see everything, and everything in the world gives us consciousness. Like even if you look at animals, you see animals, because they don't speak, their senses are more keener than ours. We look at our senses and we say, this is bad, this is good, pain, I'm holding, I want to be away from the pain. But if you look at the pain and you see the pain and you listen to the pain, you can understand the pain. Like, except I've had experience that I would see the pain and the pain would actually, I would feel it healing. And for me to be able to relax, instead of me blocking up the pain, I would listen to the pain and I would actually feel my body healing and it would dissolve. So all these things, it's all complexes. The senses is but not only in addition to the message, but to go beyond. That's all I'm going to say. But each one of us, we have to learn it ourselves, and then if we can share it with each other. And we have to change our society because look, we contain ourselves. For me to hold on to myself and everything. But if I share my energy and everything, I can grow a lot more. And that's what I've done. And that's what they say about love. With love, you get to see more. And love is so many different levels. You know?
Thank you. Yes.
I was just gonna,
No, you-
mention, just very quickly, I think it is, love has a lot to do with all this connection.
It's amazing.
You just said it, but it really is in the long run, because you do love the one you just passed, or whatever, that extra connection, we all have our own energy levels, but it draws it in, that's kind of a simplistic way of thinking, but there's nothing like love, that's how we can stop all that other crap out there, actually. A lot of people haven't made that connection yet, but I think that has a lot to do with it, because I think we've all felt that when we miss and we have that hole in our heart because of the greatest love, or even parts of that great love, we have that electric feeling.
Good, thank you. Yes, Sue.
I've been puzzling and a lot, especially recently, and also related to this is that these incarnates can communicate with us by moving objects or switching on or off the lights. Imagine those same people when they were alive in a human body, they were not able to perform those things. And similarly to us, who are still incarnating in a human body, how can we tap into that same energy to manipulate, like the garage door or bend the spoon with our mind? I believe this is possible. Like if this incarnate can do that, that means probably there's something in the human body that's blocking us from accessing that. So my question is, how can we bypass that? So we enter that same level, like a discarnate, that we can remote view or astral travel or bend the spoon with our mind, remove a tumor instantaneously. I think these are all possible from all these studies. But the thing is, how can we do that?
You should raise your vibration.
Remove the veil of consciousness.
I know, but I know some people use
train also like Uri Geller.
That do that.
Yeah, I want a demonstration.
Oh, we can see that.
I want a picture for that.
Anyone else?
Can I?
Okay.
Jack?
Yes.
I think the direction you want to go in involves fields. Because what you're talking about here is overlapping fields, interacting fields. There are intentional fields, sensory fields,
I must have been chanting.
electromagnetic fields, quantum fields. And just figuring out how they arrange themselves would be a good direction to go in.
Okay, thank you.
Well.
All right.